The crack of the slap echoed through the grand ballroom, instantly killing the buzz of 1,000 conversations. It was a sound so sharp, so completely out of place among the clinking champagne glasses and the quiet music, that it just hung in the air. Every head turned. Every eye zoomed in on two women, frozen in the middle of the room. One was Clarissa Beaumont, chest heaving, hands still raised, her face a twisted mask of rage. The other, Imani Sterling, stood perfectly still. A bright red mark was already blooming on her flawless dark skin, a shocking stain on her quiet elegance. But when she slowly lifted her eyes, there were no tears. No fear. Just a calm, almost sad pity. Clarissa thought the slap was the end of the conversation. In reality, it was the end of her world. She just didn't know it yet. Imani's gaze never wavered. The collective gasp of the city's most powerful people faded into a thick, suffocating silence. And in that quiet, Clarissa's victory suddenly felt sour, turning into a sick feeling of dread. Then, another sound cut through the tension. It wasn't loud. It was a low, calm voice, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The voice belonged to Alistair Sterling. As every eye in the room shifted to him, a cold, terrifying realization washed over Clarissa Beaumont's face. She hadn't just made a mistake. She'd just hit the self-destruct button. To understand just how badly she miscalculated, we have to go back, not just a few hours, but years, to see the foundation she just tried to blow up. Section 1, A Foundation of Envy. The Sterling Foundation's annual charity gala was the event on the city's social calendar. It was a night where fortunes were pledged, deals were made, and reputations could be made or broken under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers. If you got an invite, you were somebody. If you didn't, you were nobody. This year's theme was, A Night of 1,000 Stars, and the ballroom was a glittering fantasy. The air buzzed with power and privilege. At the center of it all was Alistair Sterling, a man who'd inherited an empire and was, since his marriage 2 years ago, obviously, blissfully happy. His wife, Imani Sterling, was the real star of the evening. She moved through the room with a natural grace that was impossible to ignore. She wasn't born into this world of old money, she was a world-famous architect, celebrated for her innovative designs long before she ever met Alistair. Her deep sapphire gown shimmered, her smile was real, and her conversations had substance. She was, in a word, luminous. And for some people, that light was just too bright. Clarissa Beaumont watched her from across the room, champagne flute gripped tight in her hand. Every laugh Imani shared, every respectful nod she got, felt like a personal attack. Clarissa had known Alistair her whole life. Their families were allies. In her mind, it had always been an unspoken guarantee that she would be the next Mrs. Sterling. It was her birthright. And then Imani showed up. A woman with no pedigree. A woman who, in Clarissa's prejudiced view, was an intruder. The fact that Alistair was head over heels in love with her was a truth Clarissa just couldn't accept. To her, Imani was a mistake that needed to be erased. For 2 years, Clarissa had fought a quiet war. Backhanded compliments like, "That dress is so exotic, Imani. You're brave to wear it." Forgetting things on purpose, like, "Oh, forgive me, I forgot your family doesn't summer in the Hamptons." It was a constant stream of petty attacks designed to isolate her. Imani handled it all with a calm dignity that only made Clarissa angrier. She never took the bait, simply offering a polite smile before moving on, her composure a shield Clarissa's barbs couldn't pierce. But tonight, something inside Clarissa had snapped. Her father's company was in the middle of a shaky merger that depended on Alistair's goodwill, and Alistair had been professionally polite, but distant. Clarissa, paranoid, convinced herself that Imani was turning Alistair against her family. She saw her chance when Alistair was pulled away by the mayor. Clarissa glided over, her smile like shattered glass. "Imani, darling," she cooed. "You look lovely. It must be so thrilling, playing dress-up like this. The people nearby shifted uncomfortably. Imani's smile didn't slip. It's for a great cause, Clarissa. The Foundation's new literacy program is going to change lives. Of course, Clarissa scoffed. All these little causes. So noble. It's almost enough to make one forget that some of us are here for actual business, to protect legacies built over generations, not just acquired. The insult hung in the air. I believe the best legacy we can protect, Imani said, her voice steady, is the one that helps those who come after us. That's the work Alistair and I are proud of. The phrase, Alistair and I, was the final straw. Clarissa's face twisted into an ugly sneer. Don't you dare say his name like you belong here, she hissed. You are a temporary amusement. You are nothing. A deep sadness filled Imani's eyes. I feel sorry for you, Clarissa, she said softly. You have so much, but you seem to have nothing at all. And that was it. Pity. The idea that this woman, this black woman from outside her world, could pity her was more than Clarissa's ego could take. She acted on pure, raw impulse. Her hand flew up, and the ugly sound of the slap filled the hall, signaling the end of her entire world. Section 2, A Love Forged in Defiance. So why was this slap such a colossal mistake? To get it, you have to understand that Clarissa didn't just attack a woman, she attacked a partnership. The love between Alistair and Imani Sterling wasn't about social climbing. It was a deep connection that had already survived bigger storms than Clarissa's jealousy. They'd met 4 years earlier on a muddy construction site. Alistair, the new CEO of his family's multi-billion-dollar real estate firm, was touring their newest, most ambitious project, a self-sustaining community hub for underprivileged families. The lead architect, who'd beaten out dozens of older firms for the contract, was Imani. Alistair walked onto the site and found a woman in a hard hat and boots, passionately arguing with a foreman. She didn't recognize him, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't Alistair Sterling, the billionaire. He was just some guy in a suit who was in her way. Excuse me, she'd said, all business. Unless you're here to install load-bearing beams, I have a skyline to build. And just like that, he was hooked. He didn't introduce himself for an hour. He just listened as she walked the site, her passion so infectious he could see the finished project in his mind. She talked about buildings not as assets, but as cradles for human potential. When he finally told her who he was, she didn't flinch. You're the money, she stated, with a hint of a challenge. I am, he'd replied, smiling. And you're the genius. Looks like we have a lot to talk about. Their relationship was built on mutual respect. He was in awe of her talent and her integrity. She was surprised to find a man under the billionaire armor who genuinely wanted to do good. They fell in love over blueprints, their conversations shifting from engineering to their hopes for the future. When Alistair brought Imani into his world, he felt the pushback immediately. It wasn't loud. It was in the polite, dismissive smiles from his mother's friends, the way conversations would stop when she walked into a room. Clarissa led the charge of this silent opposition. But for every little slight, Alistair made a public show of his love. If someone ignored Imani, he'd steer the conversation right to her and watch proudly as she impressed everyone with her intelligence. If an invitation came just for him, he'd decline. He made it crystal clear, they were a team. Disrespecting Imani was disrespecting him. Their marriage was a true partnership. Her influence pushed Sterling Industries to be more ethical. His support gave her the platform to launch her own foundation. They were a power couple not because of their money, but because of their shared purpose. This was the bond Clarissa Beaumont had just assaulted. She hadn't just slapped a woman. She'd slapped the genius who reshaped her city. She'd slapped the philanthropist changing hundreds of lives. She'd slapped the beloved wife of the most powerful man in the room. She had just triggered an earthquake, and the shaking was just getting started. So, how does someone like Clarissa Beaumont even happen? She was the product of a world where your worth is measured by your stock portfolio and you breathe in entitlement like air. Clarissa grew up in a mansion right next to the Sterling estate. Alistair was her childhood playmate, a piece of a life that seemed perfectly laid out for her. Her father, Theodore, a ruthless and ambitious man, always told her, proximity to power is power. Her entire life was engineered to make her a suitable match for Alistair Sterling. It wasn't about love, it was about merging two dynasties. She went to the right schools, learned the right hobbies, and wore the right clothes. But underneath it all, she was empty. She had no sense of self, only a sense of position. Her value was tied completely to Alistair. As they got older, he started to pull away. He was interested in books and technology, things outside their little bubble. Clarissa saw it all as a waste of time. Her father promised her it was just a phase. He'll come back, he'd said. Men like Alistair always marry women like you. It's the natural order of things. She clung to that belief. When news broke that Alistair was with Imani, Clarissa laughed it off. She figured Imani was just a temporary fling. The engagement announcement shattered her reality. It wasn't just that he'd chosen someone else, he'd chosen someone who was everything she wasn't, self-made, brilliant, and completely uninterested in the social games Clarissa lived for. Imani's existence proved that everything Clarissa had been raised to be was worthless. Her prejudice was a desperate defense. By reducing Imani to an outsider, Clarissa could avoid the terrifying truth: Alistair hadn't just chosen another woman, he'd rejected everything Clarissa stood for. Her father, watching his dream of a merger evaporate, fueled her resentment. He complained constantly about Alistair's new direction, blaming Imani for everything. He convinced Clarissa that Imani was a calculating snake, systematically destroying their world. So on the night of the gala, when Clarissa slapped Imani, she wasn't just trying to hurt a rival. She was trying to slap the world back into an order that made sense to her, a world where she was the center. It was the last, desperate act of a woman who was already a ghost. CTA. The story of Clarissa's downfall is a classic case of what happens when ugly entitlement crashes into true power and grace. If you're finding this story as satisfying as we are, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the moment it all comes crashing down, because the fallout from that one slap was faster and more brutal than anyone could have predicted. Section 4, The Slap and the Silence. Let's go back to that moment in the ballroom. The slap has just echoed out, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. Imani is still, the red mark on her cheek a brutal splash of color. For a split second, Clarissa feels a rush of victory. She did it. She finally broke that infuriating calm. But the reaction she wanted, the tears, the screaming, the shame, never came. Instead, there was silence. A heavy, profound silence from Imani. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head back to face Clarissa. Her eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with a deep, crushing pity. That look, more than anything, was what started Clarissa's unraveling. Imani said nothing. She didn't have to. Her silence was a statement. It said, "You are not worth my anger." It said, "You just showed everyone how empty you are." In that world, there's no greater put down. The crowd of influential figures was frozen, a mix of horror and fascination. Phones started to discreetly appear. The modern guillotine was being rolled out, and Clarissa had just volunteered her own neck. She felt the energy in the room shift. Her triumph was turning to dread. The silence was now a mirror, reflecting the ugliness of what she'd done. She saw the disgust on the faces around her. She heard the whispers start. She tried to justify it. Clarissa started, her voice suddenly high and thin. She insulted my family. She doesn't belong here. Her words sounded pathetic. Desperate. And into that void, Alistair Sterling's voice landed like a shard of ice. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" He hadn't shouted. He didn't need to. His voice was perfectly calm, but it sliced through the silent hall with terrifying precision. He started to walk toward them. Not a rush, but a slow, deliberate, predatory walk. Each step on the marble floor was a drumbeat, counting down the last seconds of Clarissa Beaumont's life as she knew it. The hunter was coming, and Clarissa finally understood that she was the prey. Section 5, The Public Execution. Alistair stopped a few feet away, but he didn't even look at Clarissa. His eyes were only for Imani. He gently cupped her face, examining the red mark. He didn't ask if she was okay, his touch was the question. She gave him the tiniest nod, a silent promise that she was fine. That one, intimate gesture was a fortress, shutting Clarissa out completely. Only then did Alistair turn his gaze to Clarissa. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold that felt like it dropped the room's temperature. "Theodore," Alistair said, his voice still deceptively calm. His eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto a pale, horrified man near the bar. "Clarissa's father. Theodore, come here." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Theodore Beaumont, a man used to giving orders, scurried forward. "Alistair, my boy, there has to be a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Clarissa's just overwrought." Alistair held up a hand, silencing him. "There's no misunderstanding," Alistair said, his voice a low, dangerous hum. He turned his chilling gaze back to Clarissa. "You are a guest in my home. You have stood here enjoying the hospitality championed by the woman you just assaulted. You like to talk about legacy, Clarissa. Let's talk about yours." The silence was absolute. The only sound was the faint clicking of phone cameras. As of this moment, Alistair continued, his words like daggers, "The Beaumont Corporation's pending merger with Kyotech, a subsidiary of Sterling Industries, is denied. The financing your father needs to avoid defaulting on his international loans. It's withdrawn. The call to the bank in Zurich will be made before you even reach the lobby." Theodore Beaumont gasped. This wasn't just social punishment, this was financial ruin. But Alistair wasn't done. His eyes swept the crowd. "I'm sure many of you do business with Beaumont Corporation. I would, as a personal favor, ask you to reconsider. Because if you associate with a family that condones this kind of vile, racist behavior, you condone it yourselves. And I assure you, my memory is very, very long." He was making them choose, right here, right now. And there was no doubt who they would choose. The Beaumonts were now toxic. Finally, he turned his full attention back to Clarissa. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that roared through the room. "You talk about my wife not belonging. Let me be perfectly clear. She is the heart of this family. She is the future of the Sterling name. You are a relic. A bitter ghost of an era that has no place in my world. You are no longer welcome here. You are no longer welcome anywhere I have influence. Which, as you're about to find out, is everywhere." He nodded to his head of security. "Harris, please escort Ms. Beaumont out. And make sure she understands she is now permanently banned from every Sterling property on the planet." Clarissa's face crumpled in terror. "No," she whispered. "Alistair, you can't." Alistair stepped back as if her touch would poison him. "Don't you ever," he said, his words dripping with ice, "try to speak to me or my wife again. The next time, you'll be hearing from our lawyers." The guard, Harris, firmly took her arm. For Clarissa, it was the ultimate humiliation. She, being physically removed from a party. As Harris led her away, a single sob escaped her lips. The walk of shame across the ballroom felt like miles, with hundreds of eyes and phone screens recording her disgrace. She had always wanted to be the center of attention. Well, now she was. Section 6, The Digital Unraveling. Before the ballroom doors had even swung shut, the digital execution was underway. Before the security guard even got her to the elevator, the first video clip was online. It was shaky, but the sound of the slap was crystal clear, followed by Alistair's cold, methodical destruction of her family's name. The caption was short and brutal: Clarissa Beaumont is over. #Galaslap #Sterling. Within a minute, the hashtag was trending. More videos appeared from different angles, creating a 360-degree view of her humiliation. High-def photos of her enraged face and Alistair's icy fury went viral. The internet had found its main character for the day, and it was showing no mercy. Clarissa, shoved into a taxi, was clueless for a few precious moments. This couldn't be real. Her father would fix it. It was all a nightmare. Then, her phone started buzzing. Not once, but an uncontrollable, frantic tremor. She looked at the screen. Notifications were flooding in so fast she couldn't even read them. Her hands shaking, she opened her social media. Her feed, normally full of praise, was a war zone. The video of her was everywhere. Her face was a meme. Thousands of strangers were calling her a racist, a monster, an entitled Karen. Her carefully built online image was being burned to the ground in real time. Then, a call from her father. She answered, desperate for help. "What have you done?" he screamed, his voice pure panic. "Clarissa, what have you done?" "Daddy, The banks are calling," he shrieked. "Our stock is in freefall." Kyotek just put out a press release with a link to the video, saying they're cutting all ties with us because of a fundamental misalignment of values. Clarissa couldn't breathe. "Your mother's charity board just voted her out," he continued, his voice cracking. "The invitation to the governor's dinner is gone. We're ruined, Clarissa. You didn't just end your life, you ended ours." He hung up. She was alone in the taxi, the city lights a blur. She tried calling her friends. The first call went to voicemail. The second. The third. The fourth one picked up. "Clarissa." "I can't talk," the voice said, cold and rushed. "Please," Clarissa begged, "you saw what happened."